Okay, so welcome everybody to session 2. Those who were here last week, you will remember that we went over the basics of navigation in Blender and Unity. We learned how to move, rotate and scale objects on an axis in both Blender and Unity. We learned in Unity how to snap objects together, how to use the actual numbers, the coordinates of the objects in Unity to place them exactly. And we went over some basic material creating. We did a PBR material, and I just went over a little bit, just touched on things like UV unwrapping to make the textures work properly. I will be going into way more detail about that a little bit later on.
This is a event.
Hello Azzy, welcome. Yes, this is an event.
Hi.
We're just starting. If you're interested, this is a Space Making for Beginners event where we cover the basics of Blender and Unity to give people the tools they need to start making their own worlds, their own environments.
I just figured out how to get an avatar, so okay.
Very good, well done. Okay, so this week we are going to go a little bit more detail about materials and shaders. And I'll do a few demonstrations on. I'm just moving my mic a second because I notice I'm going a bit quiet as I turn my head to look at my laptop that's got my lesson plan on. So basics, very basics. Let's just open. I think Unity will be the easiest to understand. We'll get rid of that. You don't need that. Materials and shaders. They're two different things, first of all. Materials define the appearance of objects in 3D graphics, including properties like colour, texture, shininess, transparency, etc. But shaders are the programs that run in the background. They run on the GPU to determine how those materials are rendered. So whenever you create a material, not only do you need to specify all those values I was on about, the textures, the grayscale maps, if it's got sliders for metallic and smoothness, etc., all of that, but you also have to define a shader. And they can all have different effects on how your material looks. So I'll create a sphere to start with, and I've already created a new material. So all I did here was I right clicked and I chose create material, and that's it. I haven't done anything else with it. And here all I did was right clicked, chose 3D object, sphere. And now I'm going to drag the material onto the sphere so that now any changes I make to this will be updated immediately on the object. So this is the material, and in here I can choose things like colour, metallic, smoothness. I can plug in textures into the different slots to have different effects to build up a PBR material. We can tell it whether we want it to be emissive. We can adjust the tiling if it's a tileable texture. All kinds of things you can do. But you can see it has a shader defined, which is the standard shader. If I was to change this to an unlit shader, for instance, unlit basically means, unlit colour will make it. It's literally that. It means any light that's hitting it won't have any effect on the object. So it's one solid colour. You can't actually see that it's a sphere. It just looks like a circle because it's absolutely unaffected by light at all. There is a mobile unlit shader, which is great. If you bake your own light maps though, this one does support light maps. It will render shadows on it, but it still won't look all that realistic. It'll just look like an emissive object which somehow, defying the laws of physics, receives shadows. It's it's great if that's what you want. They're particularly useful, I think, in cartoony scenes, anime scenes, things like that. It can be really quite effective. Normally, most people would use the standard shader. It is affected by light by default, but as I already mentioned last week, it's kind of broken in Banter. The main thing that's broken is normal maps. So if you're wanting to use it for PBR material, it's probably not going to work that great. And if you're only using it for a single colour, then it's a bit overkill, because you've got all of these other options that it still has to calculate even if you don't use them. So usually what I would do is create my own shaders, and what I use is Amplify Shader Editor. I'm not going to go into that just yet. All I would like to say is Amplify is a node-based shader editor, much the same as Blender is. The shaders here, the materials here, you can literally create. Don't delete everything like I've just done. You can literally create whatever you want using nodes and little connection lines, or noodles as we call them. So you can, it's much the same kind of thing. You can choose colours and whatnot immediately on your object. Amplify is paid for, but if you do a Google search, I believe there is a very good shader editor out there which is free, called Shader Forge. I believe it's free. Unfortunately, I have zero experience with it, so unless I actually have a play around with it myself, I can't show you it in action or demonstrate it just at the minute. But I've been told it's not that much different to Amplify, and it should be easy enough to, if you understand what I'm doing in Amplify, you'll get the gist of it with Shader Forge. We'll not get into that just yet. Basically what I wanted to just concentrate mostly on was the difference between materials and shaders first of all. I've shown you how to assign a material, how to adjust stuff. You saw me last week plugging stuff in. I did use the Autodesk Interactive shader, and we plugged all these different things in to build up a PBR material. If you can bear with me 1 second while I have a quick look at my notes. I don't really want to cover texture painting just yet. I'd like to do that later on, because I think it might be best to just show you. You've already seen how I downloaded textures and built them up. We can do that again as a reminder, that's no problem. And I don't want to go into procedural materials just yet. So, the main thing that I did want to explain today was regarding optimization. That's a really important thing. So when you're making materials for your objects in Unity, normally you would want a pretty high resolution texture. If you're using PBR textures, you'd want it to be quite high resolution for PC. Most PCs can handle anything up, well, 1024, like 1K, 2K textures. I wouldn't go higher than that. Higher end PCs won't struggle with it, but you know, not everybody has a higher end PC, so I always try and stick it no higher than 2K, so I'm being as inclusive as possible. But when it comes to mobile, you want to really reduce those down as much as possible. The more textures you have in your world, the tougher it's going to be on whatever device you're using. So I'm going to go into, we'll go to Ambient CG again, because that is my favourite place for getting textures. Go into materials. We'll find something we like the look of. I think we used this one last time, didn't we? Let's see what we can find that looks interesting.
What is that website again? I'm sorry.
It's called ambientcg.com.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we'll use this bamboo. Looks quite interesting. Let's get a hold of that. And we'll just use the 2K one. I've got a feeling
Yeah,
I
I
may
like
have
that
downloaded
bamboo one.
this. There's loads of these bamboo ones, I think, on Ambient CG, different colours and
There is,
different
yes.
thicknesses. And so we'll drag that into there and then just unzip it. Okie dokie, so there's our bamboo. We've got ambient occlusion, so we'll just untick that. We've got displacement. You know what, let's leave the displacement in and we'll see. I might have a play with that, I don't know. DirectX normal, that's for Unreal Engine, get rid of that. OpenGL normal, we need that. That's for Unity, tell it it's a normal map. Opacity, not sure, but it's grayscale, so we'll keep it for now. Roughness, that's grayscale. Okay, so they're set up ready to go. We'll get rid of these things, don't need them. Okay, so we'll just move that into that folder as well, so everything's together. We'll keep it as Autodesk Interactive. It was 2K I downloaded, wasn't it? Yeah, 2048 by 2048. So we'll just put them all together. I'll just click the padlock so it keeps that window open. I can have a look at this. Ambient occlusion goes into occlusion. Colour goes into colour. Albedo. Displacement, you know what? Let's just stick that in height just to see what happens. Just because I'm curious. Normal into normal.
Wow.
Opacity, we'll leave that for now. Roughness, we'll stick into roughness. Okay, so there is our bamboo. I'm just going to create a quad as well, and we'll drag that over here. No, we'll put it that way. And let's just stick the material on there so we can see it on a flat plane as well. I think that's quite nice, looks good. However, it's a 2K texture. It's not what we want for mobile. So what we would normally do is for every single texture in here, and it's often easier just to select all of them if they're all 2K. We'll untick this padlock. You'll see under here, by default, it's 2048. But if we go over here to the Android tab, we can override for Android and we can reduce it. And I usually make Android ones 512 because you don't lose that much. You don't lose that much. You lose a bit of quality, but not a huge amount. So you just hit apply. So now, when it builds your world, the Android version will have quite highly optimized textures. So it'll be half K, basically, textures for that. What you've got to remember, and this is a huge thing, a 1K texture is not twice the size of a 512K texture. It's 4 times the size. And a 2K texture is 4 times the size of a 1K texture. If you imagine a 1K texture is 1024 by 1024, imagine it as a square like this. If you make it so that it's 2048 across, like that, it's also got to be 2048 deep. So you have 4 of them making up a 2K texture. And so it's exponential. The higher you go, exponentially, the more resources you need. Your GPU requires. So it does have a big effect. It's not just a case of, but it's only 2K. Well, no, it's not, because it's 16 times the size of a 512K texture for one texture. So it is important. Now then, there's something else that you can do as well. What I'm going to do, I'll just export this. No, I won't. We'll get rid of that and we'll bring in maybe a UV sphere, because that's got lots of faces. We'll see what it can, if it can do anything with that. So, file, export, FBX, we're going to stick it in Banter Projects, Lisa's Workshop, Assets, and we'll just call it Sphere. Selected Objects, Mesh, Z forward. Export. Right. So, there's our sphere. Anything that you bring in, any FBX files that you bring in, you can actually optimize the meshes a bit as well. So if you select it here, down here there's a section called Optimize Mesh. And I'm trying to see where it, mesh compression, sorry, here it is, mesh compression. At the moment it's not compressed, but you can compress it. The higher you go, the more quality you're going to lose in your mesh, but it's worth trying just to see if it looks okay. You can see the shading's gone a bit wonky, and yeah, it's gone a little bit wrong there with high. We could maybe try medium. That looks quite good with medium mesh compression. That's another way that you can optimize stuff, especially for mobile as well. So you do, even if you've optimized it as best you can by decimating, for instance, in Blender, have a try a mesh compression in Unity as well, because it doesn't do a bad job. I'm going to go into optimizing your meshes a bit later on as well. I use an external program called Instant Meshes, which is absolutely free and is actually pretty powerful if you know how to use it. You can control the way the grid flows on your object, so it can go around creases and stuff like that and maintain edges properly and everything else, and it can really, you end up with an almost pure quad mesh, which when it's triangulated in Unity looks pretty damn good. And you can then, I'm also going to show you in later lessons as well how you can transfer the detail from your high poly mesh by baking it as a normal map onto your low poly mesh, so it looks almost the same as the high poly mesh. That is pretty cool as well. But for today, as I say, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. What was the other things I wanted to go over? See, this is what happens when you make notes for yourself and you make too many notes, then you've got loads to read through. Yes, another thing I wanted to go through, which is really, really cool, is channel packing. I mentioned this last week, and channel packing is absolutely brilliant. You'll see with this material here, let's just find the material. There we go, that one there. We've got 1, 2, 3 grayscale maps. There are essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2K textures there just to make one material. And we'll be able to hugely improve the performance of this if we can reduce the number of textures. So one of the things we can do is all of the grayscale maps we can pack into one texture and still have it look exactly the same. So to demonstrate, let's just open this in GIMP first of all. Open with, I use GIMP because it's free, but you can use any image manipulation program you like. They all do the same thing. You've just got to find out where they are in the menus and stuff. So this is how our colour image looks. This is a normal colour image, and all colour images have 3 channels, the red, green and blue channel. So you can see here, if I click on channels and I turn off the green and the blue, this is the red channel, and your green channel and your blue channel. When you combine them all together, you get a colour image. If you have fully red, fully green and fully blue, you get white when they're all combined. But you'll see in here in the channels, these little images are grey. And I can demonstrate that if I if I decompose the components, RGB, yeah. We've then got this, if we go back to layers, it's just separated them into layers. So this is the red layer, and every single pixel on this image has a value of between 0 and 1. 0 being black and 1 being white, and all shades of grey in between. So every pixel has a value which tells it how much red has got to be in the red channel. And the same with the green, how much green and how much blue. There's not much blue in there because obviously it's a green. There's a bit of blue, but not that much, which is why it's dark. But we can use these channels, and instead of putting the red, green and blue information in, we can put our ambient occlusion, our roughness and our metallic information in, and tell the shader to use each of those channels. So you can have all of those maps in the one texture, and it'll still only take up the space of a normal 2K texture. So I'm wondering which is the best way to demonstrate. You can do it manually. You can do it manually in GIMP. Let's just decompose this again. And actually, no, we don't, because we don't want to overwrite this. We want to create a new one. So we'll just create a new image, which is 2048. Oh, right, 2048. And we'll decompose that. And we're in layers. So we'll start with the red channel. Now what I normally do is I use an acronym to remember. I just remember the word arm, as in your arm or your leg, it's your arm. So we've got ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic, which goes into red, green and blue. And it's an easy way of remembering which map is in which channel. So in the red channel, I'm going to put the ambient occlusion map. So I'll just open it up. Open, it's in D, Banter Projects, Lisa's Workshop, Assets, Bamboo. And we'll find ambient occlusion, there it is. And we'll just edit, copy, go into the red channel, edit, paste. And then we can close that. We need to anchor it, so it's not a floating layer. It sets it in stone. And then we'll hide that, we'll unhide green, we'll select green, so we're doing that one next, and that one's going to be roughness, arm, A-R-M, so roughness. We'll open that up, and of course I've got to go all the way back through it, haven't I? So, this says workshop, assets, bamboo, roughness, and we'll copy that and we'll paste it in there, and then I can close roughness, and we'll anchor that, hide it, unhide blue, select it, and we want metallic. So open, D, Banter Projects, Lisa's Workshop, Assets, Bamboo, and we look, there isn't a metallic actually here. So for metallic, because we're not using it, we need to tell it we don't want any metallic at all. And to tell it we don't want any, we need to make this solid black. So we'll just make the foreground colour black, get our little paint bucket tool and fill it. And wonder why it's not working. This is not good when I've got me little... Oh no! There we go. Goodness gracious. Right, so we've got no metallic. If I'd left it at white, it would have been fully metallic and it would have been shining like silver. So bring all of these back. We've got, just check they're all correct. We've got red, yes. Green, yes. Blue, yes. So ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic. Now we can go up here. We can go to components and recompose. It'll put them all back together again. And we get this funky looking psychedelic thing here. Because it thinks it's a colour image. And it thinks that we're telling it how much red, how much green, how much blue is going to be in each channel. But it's fine. That's exactly what you want. So we'll export that as a PNG. Although if you're not using alpha channels, you can export this as a JPEG just as well. It's absolutely fine. Oh, I've just left it as untitled, but that's fine. And it's going to take a minute because GIMP's not all that efficient. And probably, well, my PC is okay actually. There we go. So there is our channel packed texture, which I'm also going to override for Android as 512 while I remember on. And we'll just put that into there so they're all together. And then to demonstrate Amplify, very, very simple shader with Amplify. We just go to Create, Amplify Shader, Surface. Again, I'm not sure how to use Shader Forge, but I am going to have a look at it and hopefully I'll be able to give you a little bit of a demonstration of that as well in the future. Because, you know, if it's free, it's worth having is the way I think. GIMP's free, Blender's free, Unity's free. Great. So, we're just going to call this, I'm going to call it ARM, or maybe ARM Shader. That's what we'll call it. And then up here where it says ARM Shader, I'm also going to type in Lisa and a /, and we'll save it. And the reason I do that is because we'll just select my material. If I type in Lisa /, I get a new menu under the shaders, so all of mine are together and I don't have to go scrolling looking for them. So we're going to give it the ARM shader, this bit material I created before. I've changed it from Autodesk Interactive. There's no options because I haven't done anything with it yet. So I'll double click to open up the shader and you can see you've got this thing here. In Blender, this is called the Principled BSDF or something. Let's have a look. There we go, material, Principled BSDF. Just make that a bit bigger. And you've got much the same kind of options, except you can change these on the fly. I've already changed the colour, but if I wanted, I could make it metallic. I could right click and shade that smooth. I could turn down the roughness, and suddenly it looks like a Christmas bauble. You can do the same kind of thing in Unity with a shader. Any shader you'll be able to do it, but I'm going to do it all with these textures that were made. So we've got to remember what we've got. We've got the colour, we've got a normal map, and then we've got ambient occlusion, roughness, and even though I don't have a metallic map, it's still got metallic values in that blue channel. So we're still going to plug it in, even though it's got a value of 0, because it means we can reuse that shader again and again. And we may want to create a material that does have a metallic map. So we'll set it up anyway. So we'll start off, if you hold T as a hotkey and click, you get a texture sample node. Another way to do it is to right click and search for texture sample. And this is where you'd put in whatever texture you're using. In this case, we're using it for the albedo, so we'll plug that in there. And we want it to be a property. At the moment, it is a property, and most things are. Ooh. Sometimes you need to change it from a constant to a property. A constant is something where you would set a value in the shader and it's fixed and you can't change it in the material. If you change it to a property, you'll get a little value box or a little slider and you can change it on the fly within your material. So we want to do that because we want to be able to plug in a texture, a different one for every material, but we need to name it so that we know what we're plugging in. We don't want it to be named texture 1, 2, 3 or 4. Otherwise we'll not know what has to be plugged in where. If I save it as it is, you can see this just says texture sample 0. We don't know whether it's to be a normal map or whatever. So we'll open up the shader and we'll rename this and we'll just call it albedo. Have a quick look at the other options. The default texture, if you don't plug one in, are you happy with it being white? Yes. So we'll leave it at that. The next one we want is probably the normal map because it's next one down. This one's a little bit different. We'll name it normal. But we also want to tell it that instead of a colour, it has to be bump. So it's going to be a bump map. And we also tell it to unpack the normal map as well, so it knows what to do with it properly. And that one we'll plug into the normal. And then the only other texture we've got is the packed one, which we've called untitled for some reason. I'm going to do another texture sample node. And I'm going to call this packed maps. Now this one, the reason why I wanted to have something in the metallic channel on our image is because we don't want to set a default texture if nothing is plugged in. Well, I suppose we could leave it as white. They're all different. Roughness, if you don't have anything plugged in, you should be telling your material you don't want any roughness, so you want it to be black. Metallic, again, you want it to be black if you don't have a value. But ambient occlusion is different. If you don't have an ambient occlusion map, you need to tell it just to be white. Because what ambient occlusion does is it multiplies the value of each pixel with the value of the same pixel in the albedo. And if you multiply something by 0, it's going to be 0, obviously. If you multiply that value by 1, it's going to be the same value. So that is how the ambient occlusion is calculated when you plug in an ambient occlusion map. So that's really important. However, you can see on here that we have the channels already set up, so we can literally just plug them in. So red is ambient occlusion, green is roughness, Unity uses smoothness, so we need to fix that in a moment, and blue is metallic. Blender uses roughness. Very often when you download materials from online, it will have a roughness map. Sometimes it will have a smoothness map, but most of the time it'll be roughness. So in order to convert it from roughness to smoothness, we want to change all the whites to black and all the blacks to white. So we just invert the image. And to do that, we use a 1- node. And I'll open it up so you can see what I mean. It's currently white, but once we plug in the roughness, it inverts it and it becomes black. And we can plug that straight. So this is now smoothness and we can plug it straight in. So we've got our material. We've got albedo, normal and packed maps that we've created. We'll plug those in and keep our fingers crossed I've done it right. Normal and packed. And you can see it hasn't worked, it's too shiny, but the reason is because I didn't tell it that this was grayscale maps. We're not treating it as a colour image. We need to treat it as separate grayscale maps, so we untick sRGB and that's fixed it. But it looks, to me, that looks exactly the same as it did before. I don't know what you guys think, but it should be because we've done it exactly right. So we can literally take that, ambient occlusion, what's that one? That one's, no, opacity, we didn't use that one, did we? It was just ambient occlusion and roughness, wasn't it? And you could literally just delete them. We haven't used displacement or opacity, so I'll just delete those. And we've literally just got the 3 textures. And that has made a massive difference on the performance. So that's channel packing in a nutshell. If you want to see how that works in Blender, because quite often you want to test out your materials first in Blender while you're building them up, if that's the way you're building your world. We just do the same thing. We bring in colour, normal. This is nice because you can drag them in easily enough. And untitled. Colour goes straight into colour. Normal is a bit different. Normal needs to be told it's not sRGB, it's non-colour. Plug it in, but we need to add a normal map node so that it knows what to do with it. We'll stick that in there. We'll just minimise those. And untitled, we need to tell that it's non-colour, but we don't have the red, green and blue channels. So we need to separate the colours. So we literally just drag that from there and we can just search for separate colour, and that's given us red, green and blue channels. And we don't need to invert the roughness because Blender uses roughness anyway. So ambient occlusion, we'll deal with that in a second, that's a bit different. Roughness plugs straight into roughness and metallic plugs straight into metallic. And that's looking pretty good. The only thing that's missing is ambient occlusion at the minute. So what we'll do is we'll just bring in, this is the easiest way I find, just bring in a dummy image that doesn't have anything in it. And we'll minimise that. And we also need to bring in a mix RGB node. I think they just call it a mix now, I'm not sure. Float vector colour, yeah, colour. Stick that in there. And instead of mix, we change it to multiply. Like I said, I told you with ambient occlusion, it's multiplying every pixel in the ambient occlusion map with the same pixel in the colour. So we plug that into there. But because that's a dummy image, we're now going to replace it. We've just got it set up correctly. So ambient occlusion now plugs into where this ambient occlusion is, which is B. And we can get rid of that. And that's it there. That's just because I get confused as to how to set it up. I find it easiest if I can visualise 2 images. But it's literally just a multiply node, multiply colour node, or mix colour node it is. What did I do? Mix. Yeah, mix. And then you can mix floats, vectors or colours, and they change completely depending on what you need it for. It used to be different in older versions of Blender. I mean, I'm using an older version. I'm using 3.4. We're on to 4 point something now. But the reason I'm still using 3.4 is because some of the add-ons I use haven't been updated to work with 4 versions yet. And until they are, I'm sticking with version 3 point whatever. My philosophy is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'm happy with 3 right now. So yeah, that's how you set up your material in Blender. And it should look roughly the same. It won't always look exactly the same because Unity renders materials differently to Blender, but most of the time it looks pretty good. It's a good approximation. So, we've covered materials, we've covered how to optimize them for mobile, and we've even covered how to do channel packing, which is a great optimization method as well. I'm wondering, because I've got a few more things here that we could go into, but I was kind of saving them for a later thing because I don't want to kind of overload you with too much stuff if this is all new. to you. Done channel packing. Hang on, let's have a look. We can have a look at light mapping if you're interested, because I know I touched on that last time as well, about when we did the manual unwrapping, how to create a second UV channel which will be used by Unity for baking your light maps too. Is anybody interested in that? Oh.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
The reason I popped back to the
Alright.
class view there is because I'm thinking, is there anybody still there? Have I been deserted?
No, no.
Because I wouldn't know when I'm in Blender.
Just keeping quiet.
Okay, so let's just very quickly create a simple mesh that we can unwrap. We'll texture. We'll have some overlapping UVs for the texture. But then we'll do a different UV map for the light maps, because if you've got any overlapping UVs at all and you don't have a second channel and you don't use Unity's, did I save that thing I exported? I didn't, did I? Right, I'll shut up for now and I'll explain in a minute. Let's just get this quickly make something that looks a bit interesting. I don't want to take ages unwrapping, though it's going to be a reasonably simple thing. Let's see, subdivide that and we'll just take that and that and that and we'll just extrude it out. There we go, that's something a bit... What am I looking for? Oh, you know what it is. Come on, Lisa. Cavity, that's what it is. I'm just trying to make it easier for you to see the edges here. If you're in standard, what's this called? This is called viewport shading view. You've got material view and rendered view. In the shading view, if you pull down the little arrow next to the overlays icon, yeah, it's not. It's if you pull down the arrow next to the viewport shading icon. I do it without even thinking. There's a little tick box here for cavity, and if you change it to both, if it's not ticked, it's a bit difficult sometimes to see the edges. So it's very useful to turn it on and just in the drop down menu change that to both, and it just makes it all so much easier to see all the curvatures and cavities and edges and whatever else. So we'll unwrap this first of all. Now what I explained last time was you want to unwrap it. I'm going to manually unwrap this one. You want to unwrap it as if it was all made out of paper, and you want to flatten all the bits of paper out on the table, but you want it so that you know how to put it all back together again, stick the edges back together and make the original shape. So you've got to work out where you want to cut the paper. So to do this quickly, what I normally do is I go up here to the active tool tab, and under options, or is it workspace? Why is nothing working properly for me today? Is it under here? Options? Yes, it is. You've got to be in UV editing tab. Under options, just tick live unwrap here, but over here in the UV workspace area also tick live unwrap, and then you're good to go. And then what we need to do is mark where we want to seam, where we want to cut these pieces up. So I'm going to start with this face here. This bit can probably stay flat. All we want to do is cut these extruded bits out. So we'll go into edge mode. Normally what you do is, once you're in edit mode anyway, is you just choose from here. I've just happened to have a pie menu set up with bag of pie. So it's easy for me select with a tab button, but you can choose up here, vertices, line, edges or faces. We choose edges, and I'm going to select that edge and select that edge, and then it's automatically set to pick the shortest path. We're going to select tag seam, so any that I'm selecting should be marked red, and I'm going to select that edge and select that edge, and they are marked red. And to flatten this bit out, all I need to do is mark these corners. We'll mark that one, and we'll mark that one. So if you can imagine, you're going to end up with a kind of cross shape. When it's flattened out, this bit's flat on the table and these bits get folded up, and you've got a flat piece. We're going to do the same with this one. So edge, 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 edge. That one's already marked. We'll mark that and that. Come on. And that. And I'll do the same with this piece here, because that's exactly the same. If I turn on sync, you should be able to see it being unwrapped live as I'm doing it as well. I should have done that in the beginning. And this bit, we'll cut it out here. And we'll mark the corners again. So now, what we can do, the rest of it, we can probably just unwrap all of that in one piece. So if I mark 3 of the bottom edges, like that one, and that one, then that can just fold forwards and be flush with this front face here. We can mark one of these back edges. I'll mark this bit here. So this one can fold forwards and these 2 can fold forwards. And then we just need to sort out this top bit. So I'll do the same as what I did on the bottom. I'll just mark that one, and that one. And there we go. That looks pretty damn good to me. Now, what we can do, if we hit U unwrap, we can give it a bit of a margin, because we want a little bit of space normally between these. You definitely want a margin when you're doing light mapping, because you can get shadows bleeding from one island to another. Don't know if anybody's played with light baking, but if you get any areas where there's dark blotches, it's usually because it's from another island that's too close to the island where you've got the artifact you don't want. So give it plenty of padding. But I think that looks quite nice. That's how manual unwrapping works, basically. But we'll keep that for the light map, because I'm actually quite pleased with that. But we've just done a copy of it. I'm just going to call that light map so I know what it is. This one, so the second channel is always, the second channel is light map. Always, always, always. First one texture, second one light map. So we're going to work on the first one for the texture. And I think what we might as well do is reuse the bamboo that we've just downloaded. So I'll just show an explorer here and we'll bring them in. Blender, shading, give it a new material. We don't need to, do we? Can we not just apply the material we had originally? Yeah, we'll just do that. So we'll go back into UV editing and we'll just select the colour so we can see what's going on. And we'll turn on material view. So that's how it's applied at the moment. It may be that we don't want it to work like that. We might want to have this look exactly like that. Like for instance, we might want to move this island. Ooh, we can't. Let's try doing face. Move it. Oh man. Try again, I hit it. We might want to move this island over to maybe here. Have I picked up the wrong one? Yes, I have. I don't know which one it's on now. Was this a side? No, this was the side, wasn't it? So we might want it to actually follow the texture seamlessly by putting it exactly on there. And we might want it rotated. I don't know. Who knows? We might want to rotate that. Put that on there. No, on there. God, goodness gracious. So you can see it does actually follow seamlessly, because this section of the texture, if you look straight on, matches up with this section of the texture. So you've actually got it overlapping, and that might be what you want. There are lots of cases where you might want exactly the same part of a texture to be applied to many, many different facings, so you have to have overlapping islands. That's absolutely fine if you're using a tileable texture, but when it comes to light mapping, it won't work, and so this is why you need a separate light map UV. All the islands must be cleanly separated in order for the bacon to work. So, don't know if that has made any sense. If I'm not being clear, please interrupt me, because I understand sometimes I waffle on and I might not be explaining myself very well. But what we're going to do is export this as an FBX, Banter Projects. What did I call it again? Lisa's Workshop Assets. And we're just going to call it, we've already had boxy thing. We'll just call it box. It's not a box, but it was a box once upon a time. Selected objects, mesh, Z forward, export. So we'll go back to here. There is our box. Okay, so anything that you've exported, it's not working, is it? Why isn't that right? Let's just delete that and try again. It's probably because I didn't have it selected. Export, FBX, export. Now it's working. So anything that you import, any objects, FBXs, OBGs, GLBs, whatever, you'll always have this option to generate light map UVs. I explained this last week. If you weren't here, I do apologise. There is a recording up on the Banter TV channel. Generate light map UVs in Unity is absolute bollocks, and I wouldn't waste my time with it. It does a really, really bad job. It doesn't use all of the UV space efficiently. You end up with way too much space and tiny, tiny islands, and you end up having to make them massive just in order to get good quality shadows, and you end up with totally bloated and massive light maps, which is why I always create my own light map channels, and I always use Bakery, because it's just faster and it's just better, and you get lovely, neat, small light maps. And Bakery will also adjust the size of your light map automatically for you to a certain extent as well, and will 9 times out of 10 give you good quality bakes. This is how Unity should have been, but wasn't, so we have to pay for an add-on to do it for us. But anyway, enough griping. So I'm not going to tick generate light map UVs because I've created my own. We can just bring it in and stick our material on it, which on there is looking awfully shiny, but it won't be. We'll just get rid of these. We don't need them. Where's my other one I brought in? Goodness knows. There. Stick that back in the middle. If you remember from last week, if you want to reset something back to the way it was, hit reset. But what you got to remember is Blender always exports everything at a scale of 100, so you need to set that back again, otherwise your object will become tiny. and you can hit F to zoom in on it. And this looks like, did I actually inset that, or is that flip normals? Excuse me, I think I did inset it, didn't I?
Yes, yes, you did.
Yes, I did. Excuse me, it's also rotated it back to 0, and it should be 90. When you export from Blender, if you remember, Blender's Z-axis is up, Unity's Y-axis is up. Yeah, I do beg your pardon, I'm just going to take a mouthful of coffee. So when you export anything, it will automatically have a rotation. It's usually minus 90, I think. It'll automatically have a rotation of minus 90 in the X, which will make it the same as Blender. And if you reset everything, it sets it to 0, and then not only will your scale be off, but your rotation will be off. I'll tell you about a very good add-on next time though. We've only got 3 minutes left. There's a great add-on which will do everything for you and make it perfect for Unity, so you won't have those issues. But for now, all I want to do is quickly demonstrate. If I just tick Contribute Global Illumination, you'll notice this has got a little line. All it's done is marked it under the static box that it's going to be baked, basically. And what we need to do is on the directional light, I don't know whether I need to set it to baked or not, but I'm going to. We need to add, because I'm using Bakery, you don't need to do this with the built-in light mapper, but because I'm using Bakery, you need to add a Bakery direct light script, match light map to real time, there we go, and we're ready to go. So we'll just go to Bakery, render light map. I usually set it to, under directional mode, I set it to dominant direction. So even though it's got baked lights, you do still get normals working quite well. It's not as efficient as baked normal maps, but baked normal maps don't really look that much like normal maps. To me, they look more like ambient occlusion maps, but it works to an extent. Dominant direction is pretty performant. You can always play around with these settings. Have a look in the documentation for Bakery if you're interested, and it'll explain which are most performant. SH or Mono SH I think are the most performant, but they have a weird greyish look to them, so I usually stick with dominant direction. When we hit enter, it'll ask if you want it to detect your optimal settings for your GPU. Has to be an NVIDIA card. If you haven't got NVIDIA, sorry, Bakery's not going to work for you. Yes, I'm going to set recommended as default, and I've only got a 1080, so I don't have RTX cores, so I'm just going to tick no. And then we can render. And keep our fingers crossed that I haven't fecked it all up 1 minute before the end of the session. Hopefully we should get some lighting, and look, the normal maps are working even though the directional light is set to baked. Because if you're unsure what normal maps actually do, they kind of determine how light is supposed to interact with a surface, which gives it a three-dimensional look. So you can see as I move this around, the light is glinting across the surface of the bamboo, and that's entirely due to the normal map. So we do have shadows. They're not fantastic because we're just using one directional light. We haven't set up any special lighting, but you can see we've got some shadow working in areas. If we look at the direction the light's shining, it's working. We've got a shadow here because the light is going at that angle, and this side is entirely in shadow. So the only detail we can really see is the normal. But it works. And if we have a look under rendering and lighting, we can have a quick look under here and see that it's tiny. It's only using one directional light map, 128 by 128. You can actually see the light maps by going into Assets, Bakery Light Maps, and you've got everything here. So that's a very, very basic thing about creating your own light maps. Every single object in all of my worlds has its own light map channel, its own separate UV channel. And you can tweak those to your liking to make them as accurate as you wish. You can see here we've got some artifact and we've got some light bleeding over the edge there. And that's probably because I haven't created enough padding between the islands. So yeah, that's basically it. I think what I would quite like to do next week, I don't know how anybody else feels, but if there's anything particular that you'd like me to go over, like go over again, I'm happy to recover stuff that we've done if you need a reminder, or if there are any particular subjects you'd like me to do for next week, please just speak up, let me know. You can DM me or whatever you want to do. Grab me in Banter, whenever. And I'm happy to do that. But otherwise, I think what we're probably going to do next week is actually start building something simple that we can unwrap, put some textures on, and maybe even upload it and have a little walk around if we've got time. A very, very basic thing. How does that
Sounds
sound?
brilliant.
Okay,
Sounds really good.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a like when you was going over the shader part, like I have a shader and like everything looks fine in Unity, but when I come in here into Banter, like and I look because I have like a glass and I look through it, it looks white. It's not the color of the shader because it's grass. I have grass that's green, but then when I look through like glass or something, it
Yeah.
looks white. The
Yeah,
shader is
that
white.
sounds like a shader issue, to be honest. Usually with
Yeah.
things like glass, I usually just make my own shaders. But if you have a look in the
Okay.
Discord, I'm sure Aline, I might be wrong, but I'm sure Aline
No, she has.
posted a shader that she wrote, she created, specifically for things like that, for transparency, for glass and whatnot.
Yes.
Oh,
It
okay.
might be worth downloading that and having a try of that shader instead and see if it
Oh,
Yeah, that
works
one
for
works
you.
great.
Yeah.
That one really works. I use it in Distractor's Globe on everything
Excellent.
that's
Is that what you
transparent
use on
and
the pink bits?
yeah.
The pink, yeah, they
On,
look great.
on the
Okay.
glass, on everything, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
think that is probably, if I'm right, I think that's probably under the share something useful channel. If you have a little look in there, there's
I think
probably
it is, yeah.
something for shaders, and you'll find it.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem.
Yes.
Does anybody else have any questions before we sign
No,
off?
that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Super duper. Okay.
I might comment on the shader forge that that's been discontinued like many years ago, so I don't think it's even
That's a shame.
working with the recent versions of Unity very well.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't
Yeah,
know
I
that.
actually had a quick
I
search
knew
for
that they'd
I
ceased
couldn't find
support for it, but I thought that it was still working with the up-to-date versions of Unity, that it would still work with a 2021.
Probably some
Okay.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think what I might
it's a
do
bit
is
of a
have a
gamble,
little bit of a
probably.
play with that and just see. I might experiment with it and just see.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, folks, unless you actually learn high level shader language, you might actually have to invest in Amplify. Although I do think, am I right in thinking I heard Shane saying they're looking into integrating Shadergraph at some point? Because I thought Shadergraph only worked with URP. So
It does work for the built-in with the more recent versions of Unity now.
okay,
So
right,
that
okay,
does work. Yeah, they just had issues because they don't. It doesn't produce shader files. It produces shader graph files.
yeah,
So that's why it's a bit wonky. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Hopefully, that'll be cool.
It would be. It would be. But as I say, I mean, my advice anyway would be to get Amplify because it works with URP, it works with built-in, it works for just about any platform you ever go to. It just works. So, yeah. It's well worth the investment. Like I say, it does go on sale quite regularly. So just keep an eye on it. You might get it for half price or something. But yeah,
Cool.
that's it. Thank you everybody for coming. I do appreciate it.